Not long after that, the BMAT, do you remember the BMAT, British Military Advisory Training Team? We were starting to get a lot of talk and movement towards amalgamation of Zipra and Zanla cadres into the Air Force, and in particular, because of the nature of the regiment, into the regiment itself. So we were preparing for this. At the same time, we got these BMAT guys. Again, no names, no pectoral. I think there were 3 of them. Not great. Too narrow. Their fields of expertise were quite narrow compared to what we were required to do. Yeah. But it was nice to have them around, extra pair of hands, different viewpoints, etc. But it wasn't a great big wow, let's put it that way. Then we got the Zipra and the Zanla. And this is when Peter Horsburgh was now becoming heavily involved in the anti-aircraft gunnery side of the business. And you may recall the talk that started to emerge just prior to the end of the war about the conventional capability of particularly Zipra, and the fact that they had actually had access to jet aircraft. So what in fact happened is whenever we did an external, all the 14,5 anti-aircraft guns and all the 12,7 anti-aircraft guns were brought to us at the depot, along with any ammunition that was recovered. So we would be training these guys on weapons on which they supposedly had already been trained. Peter Horsburgh then came up with a brilliant notion of being a man with a mind. Particularly, he worked out that if you mounted a ZBU-2 machine gun, it's a 2.2 with a 100-round magazine, circular magazine on the top. The pilots used to carry them in their survival kits. If you mounted that underneath a 12,7 and then a 14,5 and linked the operation of the trigger operation of that to the pedals on the weapon, and you then made radio controlled aircraft of a specific size, scale, and you flew them at a specific range from their gun position, the trajectory of that 2.2 was identical to that of the 14,5 with the 12.7. And it worked brilliantly. So now we get this bunch of Zipra and Zanla guys. First, we put them through some basic training so that we're all at a similar sort of standard. And then Pete takes them on the specialized anti-aircraft gunnery. And of course, like any amalgamation, we anticipated problems. We got problems. Okay. And what these cadres do, of course, they've got their own channels of communication. So they don't communicate their problems via the Air Force channel. No. They use their own channels. So we get told or informed by Air Force headquarters that there are complaints about the way they're being treated, and specifically about the fact that we are not promoting them to the ranks that they were before they even came to us. They claim to be all kinds of different ranks. So we were quite well into it, the first of them. And now these are guys we're training to be anti-aircraft gunnery instructors, eh? Not just a gunner. These are supposed to be instructors. So they're being subjected to all the weapon drills and efficiencies and firing at these radio-controlled aircraft which used to fly down at the main airfield. But they complained. And eventually we get told, notified by Air Force headquarters, that General Masuku and Munangagwa are coming to visit the Depot Air Force Regiment to talk to their cadres. So they pitch. So we give them a spiel about the place. We show them around. We had now pre-positioned aircraft, radio-controlled aircraft down at the airfield. We had dug gun pits in down at the airfield where Peter used to do his training anyway, because you use anti-aircraft guns to protect airfields. So those things were already there. And we all go down there, all these troopies, these cadres are there. They all talk and wada. And then John Cox, who was the OC of the depot at that time, he was a squadron leader then. He says, no, he was still a flight lieutenant. He says to these two generals, and they had a bit of an entourage with them. I can't remember exactly who they were, but he says, no, we'll get these guys to show you now how good they are shooting down these radio-controlled aircraft. So everybody gets in these gun pits because they're made bigger than they would normally be, because when you're doing training, you need the instructors and everybody in there. So anyway, everybody gets in these gun pits. Peter's now outside. He's flying the scale aircraft, and he brings it in on an attack path straight at one of the gun pits. Don't these cadres just jump out the bloody gun pit and run, hide in the bloody grass? It was the funniest thing ever. Anyway, eventually we land the radio control aircraft, show them what it's all about. Oh, okay, now let's have another go at this now. We had 2 gun pits working there. Yeah. So we fly this aircraft again, and yeah, they're shooting and they're shooting and they're shooting and they're shooting and they're shooting. Now, obviously, if it's a 2-2 round, unless it hits a receiver or it hits the motor, you don't know that it's just a bullet through what do you call it, balsa wood or tissue. Anyway, we land this aircraft. Everybody rushes up to now inspect and see all the bullet holes in this aircraft. Not one. Now there's silence. And this is where John Cox was so clever. What we had done earlier, we used our own instructors in a practice for this very session to shooting at a radio-controlled aircraft. But that one wasn't the same one that we flew the first time. That one already had holes in it. So we tell Peter, no, you go fly. He'd been briefed. You go and fly the aircraft again. We'll get our gunners in the gun pit now and show everybody how this thing works, which is what we did. And of course, when the aircraft lands and they go and inspect it, the other thing is peppered with bloody bullet holes. And these generals were so chuffed with this. Then they turned around to their cadre and said, hey, you just bloody do as you told you. We want to see you get to this standard. In short, that was the story, but it was, at the time, it was bloody funny. It really was. Yeah. Anyway, not long after that, John Cox was posted to Staff Officer Training Post in Air Force Headquarters. And I was appointed the officer commanding the Depot Air Force Regiment, but in an acting position. Whilst I was there, we had an exceptionally large number of military and political dignitaries that were visiting to come and see what it was all about. We had ambassadors from various countries. We had General McLean and another general from somewhere else that he brought with him. We used to host a lot of these kinds of visits and take people around, because we had a really vibrant, passionate group of people who were doing something actually quite special. And it was a good reward for people. I'm talking about our people, our training group of training people, to experience, that kind of exposure and everything else. It was great. Yeah, and then not long after that, I was actually attending a fishing competition on the Mfuli River on a weekend. And it wasn't, the place we used to hold the competitions was only about 10 or so kilos outside of Hartley. Anyway, we were fishing there, and then the next second, my wife arrives. And she says, you better get back to the house, because Wing Commander John Cox is looking for you. He was a wing commander, then he had taken over as CO of the regiment. I was still an acting squadron leader, so I jumped in my car, went back to my home, got him on the phone, and he said to me, there's been a huge mess up. I said, what? He says, there's been a massive sabotage attack at Thornhill Air Force Base. He said, we're worried about the aircraft. They've been used, the aircraft would be blown up with explosives that were planted in the aircraft. He said, we need you as the EOD guy to get in your Land Rover, well, in fact, in my staff car at that stage, get in your car, take your EOD pack, and go and clear all of the aircraft at New Serum. They've been grounded because we can't be sure that they haven't also been tampered with. So I got a hold of the airbase, got them to bring the bomb box, as we call it, with all the explosives and stuff. Got a hold of the dog handlers who had dogs that were explosive detection trained at New Serum. And they waited for us there, and then we went through every single aircraft at New Serum and checked them. And fortunately, there were no explosives in any of those aircraft, so reported back. That was the case. Went back to Hartley, and then it was a terrible time in the Air Force because, as you probably will know, there are other books like John Cox's Sabotage and Torture, which would be a good reference for anybody who wants to find out what happened. There were the aftermath of that was horrendous. The minute that happened, the army were brought in there into Thornhill. CIO were in there in a big time. There were all kinds of accusations, and I mean, you can imagine how it destroyed the spirit of the regular Air Force personnel on the ground there. I mean, it was a absolute mayhem. And then, not long thereafter, then people started disappearing. People were being arrested and detained, but they weren't being arrested in the normal sense of the word. They were detained, and they were moved to obscure locations all around the country, so lawyers could not get to them. And I'm now talking about Air Vice Marshal Hugh Slatter, Air Group Captain Phil Pyle, and the list went on and on and on. One of those that was also arrested was John Cox, a staff officer training for the regiment at Air Force headquarters. And for a period of, I forget the length of it, but it was anything up to 2 weeks, these people were missing. Nobody knew where they were. They could get no legal representation. And then one day, I got a phone call at home at night. And it was from Sandy Cox, John Cox's wife. And she said a very simple statement to me. She said, the legal guys have managed to find John and have spoken to him. I have been asked to send you a message. And the message is that John is worried about you. Now, I was at home in Hartley at the time, to the night. And we'd all been sitting on tenterhooks because none of us knew what the hell was going on. And I said to my wife, Di, I said, hey, this spells trouble for me. John Cox would not send me a message like that unless he had some cause for concern about my well-being. So I said to her, fine, I said, there's nothing we can do. What's going to happen is going to happen, if anything. I said, but I'm taking all my explosives out of the cupboard and I'm packing them in my staff car. And I went to work as per normal the next morning, unloaded them into the armory. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a call from the guard room. There are people here from CIO to see you. I said, well, send them. So they came into my office. Are you so-and-so? Yeah, I'm so-and-so. Can we search your office? I said, feel free. Search my office. Now, they're speaking Shona. Now, in those days, I could still speak, not fluently, but I was reasonably proficient in basic Shona. And I can hear them talking to themselves, and the one says to the other one, no, we haven't got a lot of time. We need to get this guy to Gwela. But first, we've got to go to his house. So I hear this. So then they say, all right, let's go to your house. I get in the back of the car. They drive me to my home in Hartley. So we're going to sit there, search the house. I said, feel free. I said, while we're doing that, you go and change to civvy kit, because I was in my uniform. So I went and put on my civvies. Then they said, no, we're going to go now. I said, where are we going? He says, no, we can't tell you. I didn't let on that I already knew where I was going anyway. So I said to him, well, I want some time with my wife to talk to my wife, please. Yeah, okay, you've got 10 minutes. So Diana went in the bedroom, and I just said to her, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but all I know is it's not going to be good, because they may have got to John Cox, but what about all of the others? So I said, you must anticipate that I won't be coming back here in a hurry. And gave her a bit of advice and what have you. Fortunately, her folks lived just around the corner from us, not far, in a small town. Anyway, they take me in this car. They drive at some ridiculous speed all the way down to Gwela, and then they don't stop in Gwela. They keep going to Selukwi. Okay? I get to Selukwi. They take me out of the car. I'm not handcuffed or anything. Take me out of the car. Take your shoes off, take this off, take that off, and they're going to lock me in a cell. And they leave. Now I'm alone in this bloody tiny little stinking cell. And you can imagine how your mind starts going. You're thinking, well, what the hell is going on here now? I mean, at this stage, nobody's even said a word about why I'm being detained. Anyway, the next morning, sure enough, about 9 o'clock, they pitch up back in Selukwe. They take me into an office in the main police station. They sit me down. And I won't mention the guy's name, but this detective inspector from the CIO takes out a piece of paper, puts it in front of me, says, read that. Yeah, man, oh man. So I read this statement. And it's John Cox, signed by him, stamped by the magistrate, claiming that I am the one who transported 3 saboteurs in my staff car from Hartley to Thornhill and dropped them off there, and I supplied the explosives. Now, here's my boss, my friend, my colleague. We've known each other for years, and I'm reading this, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe what I'm reading.
Good.
I mean, you know yourself what you've done and what you haven't done. Yeah. I mean, I still get ice cold when I think about it. Then the realization came to me. Whatever they've done to John Cox, I don't know at that time. But what I did know was that it must have been extreme for him to make that accusation about me. Anyway, they told me now I must confess. I've got nothing to say to you. This is bullshit. Well, there it's stamped. You can see John Cox has signed it. Do you know his signature? Yes, I know his signature. Well, sign, confess. Sorry for you. They said, all right, go back to your cell. There's some paper and a pen. Go and write your statement. They take me back to the cell. They leave me there. And I'm writing on a piece of paper, sitting on the floor, writing on the concrete. And I just write there. Garbage. Basically denying anything to do with anything. And saying to them, if you think I've done this, then go and check that, and go and check this, and go and check that. I can't remember that. Anyway, then they send somebody to collect me. They take me back to the room in the police station. Give me they say, where's your confession? Give it to them. They read this, say, what bullshit is this? I said, well, you asked me to tell you what I did. That's what I did on that day. But this is not what John Cox said. I said, well, I don't believe John Cox said that in the first place. I said, I know John Cox. I've worked with him for years. Now you're telling me this nonsense. Oh, okay. Next trick is, you know the 5th Brigade? I said, yeah, I know the 5th Brigade. I've heard of them. Don't know them. You know that they've got a base at the old Guinea Fowl School? I said, yes, I know that. I said, well, we're going to take you there. We're going to hand you over to the 5th Brigade. They will make you talk. I said, well, if that's what you're going to do, then bloody get on with it. Now we'll come back tomorrow. Now they chuck me in a wire cage. Those big wire cages that they used to have were like a small exercise yard. They chuck me in a wire cage. They leave me there for 2 days. Hardly any food at all. And now you're sitting there. Now your head is spinning, eh? What's going to happen to my wife? What's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen to me? Not a very pleasant experience, let me tell you. What I didn't know at the time was I happened to be the last person arrested. Okay. Obviously, John Cox could hold out longer than some of the others who had implicated others did. But I was actually the last one arrested, and I actually have a British citizenship. Although I was born in Rhodesia, my dad, because he came from England, we were able to get British passports, my wife and myself. So what actually happened was, of course, there was a huge political furore going on between the Sqn Ldr government and the British government. And the secretary, or whatever, I think I called him the secretary or something or other, was coming out to meet Mugabe and discuss this fiasco that had been going on. So I established well after the event that I was very fortuitous because John Cox had got access to his lawyer when Sandy phoned me the night before I was picked up. So we're talking about a 3 to maybe 4 day time frame. The others were still being tortured and were still making their so-called confessions. But by now, the minute they made a confession, that confession had to be put before a magistrate, and it had to be accepted by the court as a confession. And the minute that happened, they got access to their lawyers. So everybody was starting to get represented at around the time they were busy accusing me of being involved in this whole thing. The first sign of any hope, because I must have been in there for, at that time, probably about 10 days, we're constantly under threat, interrogation of all sorts, accusations of all sorts, on and off, on and off, on and off. Then one day I was told, get in the car, you're coming with us. Now I'm thinking, what the shit is going to happen to me now? Anyway, I don't get my shoes, don't get anything. I'm still in dirty old clothes. They put me in this bloody Mazda 323, and they drive me to the Gwela police station. They put me in a cell there. But an hour later, they come and fetch me, and they take me into an office. They say, sit here. Sitting there. The next second, Brett Gardner, who was a lawyer working for the Air Force as a TF, and the Air Marshal, Walsh, Norman Walsh, walk in the front door. And I literally tell you, I sat there in disbelief and I started to cry. Because here suddenly is a friendly face, you know? Anyway, they say to me, don't talk, piece of paper. This office will be bugged. They're bugging all the officers. So be careful what you say. Brett Gardner takes a piece of paper, eats it. And then they say, are you okay? And whatever, hugs and whatever. You know, are they looking after you? And say, well, no, not really, but I mean, I'm still alive. Are they feeding you properly? No, they're not feeding me properly. Okay. And he said, I can't remember, it was a fleeting visit. It wasn't there. They weren't there for more than 10 minutes. Anyway, Norman Walsh, the Air Force commander, says to me, is there anything we can do or arrange for you? I said, yes, I want to see my wife. This is now probably 2 weeks after I was arrested. And he says, okay, but they do tell me that other guys have also testified and made statements, false statements, under oath, and that there's a whole scenario surrounding the other officers that were involved. So I was told by Rick Gardner, who took me to the one side, and he said to me, listen, if they torture you, if they threaten to torture you, don't put yourself through that agony or that experience. He said, what you do is you do the following to change and alter your statement. First thing was change your signature from your normal signature. Then do this and then do that. I can't remember the exact instructions he gave me, but he said to me, write whatever they tell you to write, and then just make sure you doctor your signature and whatever you, so that we can prove that it was not you, or you have not made that of your own free will. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And then off they went. So now I'm thinking, all right, how much time have I got left before I'm now subjected to whatever? Anyway, they put me back in the car. They take me back to Selukwe, chuck me in a wire cage in the cell. Wire cage during the day, cell at night. Now my bloody mind is racing, and I'm thinking, what the hell now? About a day later, or 2 days later, they come and take me out the cell again. Say, we're going back to Gwela, get in the car. We go to Gwela. Now, on the road between Gwela, Selukwe and Gwela, because we're traveling from Selukwe side, you go through quite a hilly area just before you get down to Thornhill, Guineafell School. And there's a big lay-by there, with a scenic view. We're driving along, and there's these same two buggers sitting in the passenger seat and the driver's seat. I'm in the back. They pull off into that lay-by, quite near the verge. It was quite a steep drop-off. They get out the car, leave the doors of the car open. My door's not locked. And they go and stand in the grass and take a pee. And talk and talk and talk and talk. They turn around, they come back, and they stop and say, what are you still doing here? I just burst out laughing. I said, what do you mean? I said, do you really think I'm that stupid that you haven't set me up to make a run for it? And I said to them straight, I said, I know what you've done. You've probably got bloody 5th Brigade all around here waiting for me to take the gap. I said, I wasn't born yesterday. Okay, carry on. We got into town, locked me in a cell in Gwela. Half an hour later, back in that same old office where I saw the commander of the Air Force, the door opens, in walks my wife. Man, it was the most emotional experience I've ever had.
Oh, I bet.
Anyway, so it transpires that Norman Walsh kept his promise. He arranged for the driver at the depot to use my stock car and ferry my wife down to Gwela and back again. And I think she did that 3 times over the next sort of week. But there was immediately a change in the attitude of these guys. But that same day, after my wife had gone, they come to me and they say, are you hungry? So of course I'm hungry. I haven't eaten a decent meal in 2 weeks. So they say, okay, well, come, we'll take you for lunch. So we walk out of the police station, across the road, and there was a Waldorf cafe. Been there for donkey's years, on the right-hand side of the road. Forget the name of the road now. We walk down there. They take me into this. Now I'm filthy, barefoot, haven't shaved for 2 weeks. And I mean, my civvies are filthy. I think I threw them away afterwards. So I didn't care. I sat down there, I had a steak, egg, and chips. They paid for it. We walk out of the restaurant, or the cafe as it was. We're now walking back towards the police station. And there's a couple of shops before you get to the corner. I'm walking along next to them, or slightly behind them, I can't remember. And they both step into the shop. And they go off and do something. And yeah, I'm standing on the pavement in my hometown. And I'm thinking, twice in one day, are you really that thick? Yeah, they set me up. They tried to see if I'd make a run for it. Because if I had done that, they would have had reason then to actually formally arrest me. I was never arrested. I was never charged with anything. Because they had no evidence. Absolutely zero. Other than the confession by John Cox. Anyway, it wasn't long after that they came and fetched me again. This time they gave me my shoes and the envelope with all my bits and pieces that I had, my watch and all of that. So come, we're going. Took me back to Gwela, and I thought, okay, where are we going now? And then he said to me, no, go in that office. It was the same office again in the police station there. I go in there. Then they say to me, we're going to release you today. Yeah. So I said, really? I'm thinking, was this another trick? What's going on here now? No, we've decided to release you. That doesn't mean that you're off the hook. We're going to release you for the time being. Now you must go back to work and you must work hard. Couldn't believe my ears. So I said, are you serious? He says, yeah, you can go. I said, do you want us to take you to your parents' house? Because obviously they'd done their homework. They knew my folks lived in Gwela. I said, no, don't worry. I said, can I use your phone? He said, yeah. Rang my old man's workshop. And now, remember that, my folks, they don't even know what's happened to me. Hello, Dad, how are you? Oh. I said, are you busy? He said, why? I said, come and fetch me at the police station. They're letting me go. He was there in short time. An amazing experience. Amazing experience. Yeah, so he came and picked me up, and I then went to my folks' place. First thing I did, had a beer, had a bath, phoned my wife, and she came through with my kids and picked me up. And that was my Air Force story. I went back to the depot. I still had some months to complete on my contract, because when I joined the Air Force, I came in on a short-term contract. And so I stayed on, and obviously was very carefully thinking about, now, what do I do when I finish my stint? And during that time, I was offered the position of Staff Officer Admin at Thornhill Air Base. It's also a squadron leader post, but you're then in charge of all the admin, basically like an adjutant. But the morale at Thornhill was so low, and they were still being interfered with by the CIO and God knows what else. The trust levels were zero. It was just a completely unpleasant environment. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have jumped at it. But at that stage, I decided, I'm not going to renew my contract. Let me run it down. So I turned that job down. But now I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do with myself come at the end of my contract? And that decision got made for me one day. Rhett Gardner, my lawyer, phoned me. And he said, John, they have scheduled this court case for I think it was the 13th of July, the trial date for the Air Force officers who were still in detention. He said, they've set the court date for the 13th of July. When do you finish with the Air Force? So I gave him the date. He said to me, how soon can you leave the country? And I said, why? I said, really, right now, I have got no plans to leave the country. He said, John, listen to me carefully. Your rearrest is imminent. They will rearrest you to prevent you giving evidence for the defense. He said, we have wind of it. Get out now.
Yeah.
So I thought, yo, okay, this changes everything. Got hold of my old man, discussed it with him on the phone. And I said, we need to get out of here. My mom's sister was living here in Joburg at the time. And between her, my mom and the sister, they made arrangements for me to actually come to South Africa and stay with mom's sister, just to get out of Zim at that stage. So that's what happened. My dad came, picked me up, drove me up to the airport in Harare. In those days, you had to buy a ticket physically. You couldn't, there's no internet story like that. And the most amazing thing happened. While we were traveling on that road out to the airport, we stopped at a traffic light. Well, my dad stopped at the traffic light. He was driving. I was in the passenger seat. Next second, this car pulls up next to me. Two black guys in it. Undo the window. It's those two buggers who arrested me. Just pure coincidence. Stop next to me and now starting having a chat through the car window.
Wow.
And we're on the way to the airport to buy me a ticket to get out. So now I'm like this, shaking. We get to the airport, buy the ticket. My dad drops me back in Hartley. He goes to Gwilla. And I forget how many days it was. It was a very short period of time. Just managed to get everything sorted out with the missus. And jumped on a plane. But first, I come through the airport, the normal controls at the airport, customs and whatever. And I'm standing in the waiting area. And it's like 20 minutes before you can board. And I'm looking at all these people and I'm trying to see if I recognize anybody. And I was a nervous wreck, and I thought, no, stuff this. Let me just go into the toilets and go and sit down in a cubicle until I hear them call the boarding call, which is what I did. And then I came out of there and then used to walk across the hard stand to the aircraft in a long line. Walked out, got on that airplane. I did not relax until we were well in the air. Yeah, flew here with 500 Rand, I think it was, and had to start life all over again. I left my kids up at Zim. They moved in with them, with Di's mom and dad in Hartley. And started from ground zero.
Man.
Yeah.
What a harrowing experience. Good
absolutely. Lord. We still, now you think back and you say, was it real? But oh yes, it was real. It was a terrifying experience. It was the uncertainty. It was the fact that you'd been betrayed, but then I knew. And the funny thing is that John Cox ended up working for me here in South Africa. Yeah.
Terrible.
In fact, he's just recently passed away. So R.I.P. John.
You must wake up on the odd nights and get shivers when your mind thinks of it, hey?
Yeah, I did. For a long time afterwards, you would have flashbacks. I no longer get them, thankfully. And I can talk about it, but it's still an emotional thing for me. It burns you deep, man.
John, I had no idea reading your synopsis that the story would be so compelling. It's another facet of that dreadful time in our history.
Yeah.
I just want to ask a couple of questions, but because time's running out, if your answers could be fairly short.
Sure.
Was it only the British aircraft, the Hawks, that had been delivered that were blown up, or any hunters?
No, there were a couple of hunters as well.
Sad.
You were hawks and hunters. We'd got 3 hawks in just prior to that demolition job.
Mm.
So there was damage to the hunters and the hawks.
Wow.
I think one of them was a complete write-off, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact facts now. But they are available in John's book.
What year was
Sabotage and
that?
Torture.
Do you remember?
Sorry?
Do you remember what year it was that happened?
82. July 82.
Mm. That's
Because
very.
I finished. Yeah, it was July 82.
That's very interesting because in one of my episodes, I interviewed a very senior South African officer who was put in charge of special forces overlooking Rhodesia, Zimbabwe as it was then. And at one point, believe it or not, and you can listen to his videos, so you don't have to take it from me, Mugabe was considering invading South Africa because he had a hard time with Mandela. And they wouldn't have got more than 20 Ks into South Africa.
No, they wouldn't.
But I'm wondering if the aircraft were blown up to prevent that. I mean, they could never have served any purpose.
No, I think it would have been too early for that at that stage.
Too early. Yeah.
There was a rumor going out for some years after that it was an attempt by the South Africans to disarm the threat, so to speak, of the Air Force.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough out there now for people to realize that yes, the South Africans were involved, but I don't think that was the real motivation. I think what was more disturbing to me, and this is just my opinion, is that the arrests that were made of the Rhodesian Air Force guys, that wasn't a random thing. People were taken out of very key positions. So it was clearly in my view, if you look at the guys who were taken out, starting with the AVM, the Air Vice Marshal, they were taken out for a reason. That reason remains unknown. But why were we singled out as individuals? I can understand John Cox because he was the CEO of the regiment, and the regiment is there to defend the airfield, and that defense failed on that particular occasion for reasons that we now know. But why some of the pilots? Why Phil Pyer? Because he was due to be the next AVM. You know, there was a whole lot of question marks about, was this random? Was it a strategy?
The CIO must have had profiles on everybody, and the fact that you were actively involved with using explosives all the time might have been the reason they came after you.
Exactly.
But in closing, there's one thing I want to go back to, which I didn't have time to talk to you about earlier. You know, the downing of the Viscounts was very controversial, or rather, the reaction to it. When you were in that area, did you ever hear whether that group was killed or captured? Did you have any feedback on that?
Well, I do know that the SAS were put in there after the first Viscount. Darrell Watt led that operation. I'm led to believe, but I stand to be corrected, that some of them were taken out, but not necessarily the entire group, because I don't believe that anybody ever came across the remnants or whatever of the Strela rockets. So yes, I know Darrell Watt was in there, and if I remember correctly, he did account for some. Whether they were the same groups is, I think, a moot point. I don't think anybody would ever know, because there was nothing to substantiate that, no evidence to support it. But in that similar area, but then there were so many of those buggers running around there anyway. It was really no-go territory. I mean, we even had our Mashonaland West Administrative Reinforcement Unit in there with D.O. Bryn Price, and yeah, I mean, it was a significant effort to try and find the perpetrators and wipe them out. But whether it ever really happened, I don't have that knowledge.
Thanks. I only asked this question not to discredit anything that anybody else has said, but just to get more of a overall picture of what happened at that time. John, it's been a truly fascinating talk. I think the audience is going to find it really fascinating. I want to say thank you very much for coming on board. It's been a wonderful talk, and I'm sure you feel quite quite a cathartic event, that you've spoken about it. And I want to encourage other guys who've got all these stories wrapped up in their heads to please come forward. Please subscribe to the channel, smack that like button, and give John a few bucks through Patreon. John, thank you very much for coming on board, as I said. And yeah, I'm sure you're going to get a very positive response to this talk. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Tony. Thanks for the opportunity. I admire what you and John van Zyl and others are doing. It's a glorious work, and yeah, that history has to be preserved somehow. It can't be lost.
Absolutely, considering all the lies that have come against us over the years.
Absolutely.
John, thanks very much again. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Have a good one.
You too.